Hello, welcome to Workout Wednesday, week 32 with Power BI. And this week we'll be creating an SVG pictogram with the Matrix visual. The pictogram was inspired by the FiveThirtyEight article, Nobody Had More Style Than Jay Wright. And what we can see here is that Jay Wright is a pretty snazzy dresser. And the team at FiveThirtyEight took a number of images of his suits and coded them. And what we can see here is that we have tie color, suit color, shirt color, and pocket square color encoded from a bunch of these images, which we have then manually obtained and entered into an Excel workbook and made available via GitHub. So the next thing we need to do is either source or draw an SVG. I chose to draw my own SVG in PowerPoint, and doing so using a path shape. So the first thing I decided to do, well actually no, I started using just regular shapes to begin with. So I would rotate it's getting a bit wobbly, a triangle shape initially, created some rectangle shapes, for the collar. And the reason we've created shapes like so is that these can then be colored later on. To create a tie, for example, we'll be using this shape path like so. And if we need to change and edit the points to make it a little bit more neat, we can do so. And so this is one I've created earlier. And what we can do is once we've created those shapes, we can save as an SVG like so, and we'll call that example suit. So what happens when we open up an SVG into a browser and we right click on it and we can inspect or view page source. So here we've got a SVG statement, and then we can see in this SVG that we've got a grouping. So this is the grouping of all the SVG elements. So it's grouped the rectangle, it's grouped a path shape, another path shape, another rectangle, and some more path shapes. So what we can do is we can copy this code and we can paste it into Notepad, Notepad++, Visual Studio, whichever suits you as an individual. And we can just format this a little bit to make it a little bit more readable. And we can start to see all the elements and all the shapes that we used to create the SVG. So that's the beginning of the grouping, that's the end of the grouping, this is the beginning of the SVG tag. And then if you're familiar, you'll be able to remember which shapes were what. So we give this an ID of shirt, and then we'll give this an ID of collar. And we had a number of shapes creating the shirt. So we'll call this collar. This was also collar. This one here was also part of the collar. This one here formed the suit. This one here formed the tie. And this one here formed the pocket square. Now, you can create your own SVG or reuse the one that was uploaded to GitHub. So all uploaded with the code. I think you can wrap. Where's the wrap? You can wrap somehow. Can't remember how to do that. So one thing we need to do before we use this in an SVG measure is find all the quotation points and replace them with a single mark, like so. And then we can get ready to copy this into our measure. So in a blank workbook, we are going to grab our data. We're going to transform. And we have an index column already in the Excel file. But what we want to do is we want to think about creating a matrix grid. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to create a column that positions the SVGs across columns and a column that positions SVGs along rows. So one thing we're going to do is that we're going to go to transform, and we're going, well, perhaps add column, and we're going to go into standard, and we're going to go modulo, and we're going to enter the value 10. We'll replace 0 with 10 in this case. Then we'll create another column. What we want to do is create another index type column, but for the first 10 we're going to have values of 1. For the second 10 we're going to have values of 2, and for the third 10 we're going to have values of 3, and so on. So I'm just going to rename this column. Oops. And then so what we're going to do is we're going to add an index column. And we're going to start from 1. And we're going to increment, oops. And we're just going to change that to 1 divided by 10. And what happens here is that you'll get some fractions. And we'll rename to row. And what you can do now is we can round down. And then we get our 1s and 2s and 3s. So how you want to display your SVGs is up to you in terms of, we should just be able to round down just from that. Don't need to, oops, transform, there we go, not add column. There we go, we can just round down without adding a column. So how you want to display your SVGs and how you want them to run across the page is entirely up to you. At this point as well, we have just the plain colors for each of the clothing items. So we've got navy, blue, yellow, red, green, orange, purple. So these are quite appropriate as CSS colors. However, we might want to change those into hex values, and when you decide to do that, we can do different shades of blue for the shirts and the ties to make them sort of stand out a little bit more against each other in the resulting image. Again, that is entirely up to you. So close and apply. There we go. So copying the SVG from before, we're going to come back into our Power BI file and create a new measure. So we'll call this SVG suit and we'll paste our SVG code. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this one like so, and then we're going to make that text like that and return SVG. Now with SVGs in DAX and displaying them in matrix visuals, we need to put a data image prefix. So we'll call that and that prefix is available via Googling. For a little bit of reminder, we can find it here and paste that in like so. So then we need to append the image prefix to the rest of the SVG, which we can do down here. like so. So that will return an SVG of our suit. So one of the things we need to do is that in our SVG we have our group and we have a number of our little elements as well. So we've got a shirt shape element, our collar shape elements, our pocket square shape elements. And so with each of these, the pocket square, we can see that it's a rectangle shape and it starts at the coordinates of x 593 and y 566. And the rectangle has a width of 75 and a height of 37. So the outline is black and the fill here is white. So what we want to do is we want to change these fill colors to be data driven according to the data that we have in these columns over here. So for our pocket square, we want to change the fill according to what's in the pocket square field. So we're going to create a few variables. So we'll call the first one suit. And because we'll be displaying these SVGs in a matrix visual, we can just use max, and then we'll go max of the suit column. And we'll do the same for the other clothing items. So shirt, tie, and pocket square. Like so. And then coming into our shirt element, we can then change. So see how we've got the beginning of the encapsulation, the quotation mark here. So at this point, we need to put another quotation mark to end that. Append the value that will be coming from the suit color. And then append the remainder of the SVG text. And we'll do that for all of the elements. So that's now done. And we just need to make sure that our SVG data category is now set to image URL. So now we can start building out our matrix visual. So change the size of the page, custom, or make it square. Gives us a little bit more space. And row, column in the rows field, well, the columns column in the columns field as well, and the SVG suit measure in the values field. And looky what we've got here. So we've got some of our elements a little bit muddled. So we'll have a look back in our SVG. We've got shirt, collar, collar, suit, and a tie. So I think we've gotten the tie and the suit shapes the wrong way around. So we'll just fix that up. Oops, hang on, typo. There we go. And here we've got shirt and we've put suit color. We actually need that to be shirt color. That's more like it. And there we have it. So what we just need to do now is do a little bit of formatting. Again, we can probably go in and use some hex values instead of CSS color names and just sort of change the shades of some of these blues of the shirts. Make the shirts a slightly lighter color than the ties so that there's a bit more of a visual difference there. And then go through and update the table. So set that to default of none, remove the grids, and play around with the look and feel. And done.